Well, terrific. So we see our official welcome from our programs coordinator behind the scenes, and I'll begin the program and officially welcome everyone to this gallery talk on women artists in the permanent collection. My name is Maura O'Shea. I am the Director of Education here at the museum, and it's really a delight to be with you this afternoon for this conversation, spotlighting, well, it turns out 9 women artists from the museum's permanent collection. We're really thankful for your support, all of our members who are out there, all of you who are tuning in, and certainly all of our wonderful sponsors, including Stanley Black & Decker, Bank of America, Travelers, and so many other individuals who have been supporting this year's initiative to really bring the great women artists to the fore through our 2020 Women Artists Initiative and series of exhibitions that kicked off in January, as well as a series of talks like this one that are focused on our permanent collection and women artists in the collection. So again, thank you for joining us. This conversation should be about 45 minutes in duration. I will be discussing 9 women artists, and before we get to that, I'm going to show you some information and talk to you a little bit about how I arrived at these particular artists. And at the end, I'll be happy to answer some questions if they arise, as many as possible, if there are any. So if you do think of a question, please put it in the chat. And at the end, I'll be able to take a look at those. They will be able to see them during the conversation. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. And hang on, there we go. In developing this talk on women artists in the permanent collection, which is an area that I have a lot of passion for, I went about a process of, looking through the collections to figure out how many works I might discuss, which artists I might discuss, and came up with kind of a short list. And I tagged it Trailblazers and Visionaries because it's something that the 9 artists all have in common. But before we get to that, I just wanted to take a moment to just give everyone a sense of the number of works by women artists in our permanent collection. So the number of works is about 1,100. The number of women artists represented is 451. And if you look a little bit lower, it's a little over 8,000 out of 8,000 plus total works in the permanent collection. That gives you a sense of the balance. And again, part of this year's initiative, and in conjunction with the 100th anniversary of the celebration of the 19th Amendment, passage of the 19th Amendment, we're really dedicated to focusing on women, and not just now, but moving forward in terms of the permanent collection and acquisitions. And we'll see that in this presentation. As I mentioned, as I started thinking about who to select, even though women artists are minority representation in the collections, there's 451 different women to discuss. And so here's a little bit of the process I went through. I started pulling works and kind of putting them aside, kind of like turns out they created sort of a collage. So I'm just going to show you 4 quick slides, and these are works that we're not going to discuss today, but they're probably some of your favorites, or at least one you're quite familiar with. You can see our Mary Cassatt is here, George O'Keeffe, or Nevelson, Grandma Moses. If we move on to some more contemporary works, the Enid Bentley charm bracelet, or Cindy Sherman, Beautiful and Carrie in the lower right. Some, again, more contemporary works by Jennifer Knaus in the center. She's a Collinsville artist. A beautiful piece by Mara Superior on the left. It's a cabinet with her incredible porcelain works, and some others as well. And the 4th slide that I'll just show you, an illustration by Rowena Morell down in the lower right, a holographic image on the lower left by Harriet Kasdan Silver. And I put the Christo up on the left because Jean-Claude and Christo worked as a team. So that gives you a sense of some of the images, and that's not the full list, obviously, that I was looking at in trying to pull this together. So before we jump into the actual artists and the artworks, I just want to give you some kind of threads, some through lines, if you will, in looking at what are connections between these works and these artists. Kind of these 5 words popped out in terms of their work, that all of their work really is very personal. They work from a very personal place, and the personal can often be a political, make a political statement. Additionally, their work is intentional. I mean, they're quite aware of the audience that they're trying to reach, the messages they're sending, and the way they're using media, which sort of rolls into the work being innovative. In many cases, each of these women was using materials and processes in a new way, a fresh way, totally pushing the boundaries of traditional fine art. And in so doing, the first 3 lead to very impactful work and statements that are made by each of these artists, particularly when it comes to human rights and social issues, gender equality, and race. So across one of the major linking elements is that each of these artists is really a humanist. I'd say they're probably all feminists as well. And hopefully you'll take away from this sort of a picture, a little snapshot, brief snapshot of their lives, all of which are quite interesting. And then, it'll inspire you to learn more about the women artists in our permanent collection and beyond. And hopefully think about the impact of their work and how increasing and acknowledging that greater representation of women artists in museums and galleries and textbooks also translates into greater representation for all people in society. And this last piece we'll come to at the end. So we're going to begin here with Jessie Wilcox Smith, who was an illustrator. Most famously, she was one of the most important and prolific illustrators of children's books in her time. She was a student of Howard Pyle, spent most of her life in Philadelphia, and certainly was a trailblazer. She and Violet Oakley and Elizabeth Shippen Green were all students of Pyle's when he taught at Drexel University when he first began teaching, and they were so committed to their art that they lived together so unconventionally, early 1900s in a place called the Red Rose Inn on the main line in Philadelphia. And here they are, you can see them sitting, and we can see Jessie Wilcox Smith facing the camera, sort of a great, really authoritative image, toasting themselves, I would hope, I suppose. And why not? Wilcox Smith really went on, not only illustrated children's books, but she was regularly featured in Harper's and all women's periodicals. And she knew her audience very well. She was able to inspire women and girls, particularly female readers. And here we see a work from the New Britain collection. It's an illustration of Jo and Beth from Louisa May Alcott's book, Little Women. And it's really just a tender moment between the 2 of the 4 March sisters, Jo being the protagonist, leaning over Beth, and who's embroidering something. And we can see this really tender moment between 2 young sisters. And we see Wilcox Smith's skill in just really bringing our attention into their faces. It's so subtle, but we sense a kind of thoughtfulness and a caring and a delicacy. And it's wonderful and beautiful to see. We come in here, how then we come right down to these hands, and it's just so finely detailed. And then very much like someone with whom she was compared often, Mary Cassatt, we see the details sort of soften and fade away down in the lower area. So it's a wonderful charcoal, oil, and watercolor mixed media piece on paper. And it just has, you know, sort of the spirit of the artist within it. Another really interesting and important artist, of course, Dorothea Lange, different media. Here we see her up in this upper right here. I just found this image. I just thought it was fantastic. Sitting on top of a car using, you know, this camera, this huge apparatus to capture, as many of you know, not only life during the Great Depression, but in this series of work, afterwards, she was hired by the Farm Security Administration to document the migration of migrant workers and the movement of migrant workers, particularly in California. She was born on the East Coast and was part of the photo secession movement, and then decided she wanted to travel the world and got as far as San Francisco, and you know, ended up really being the major documentary photographer for the Great Depression and years beyond as well. And I thought this quote here, "The camera is an instrument that teaches people how to see without a camera," is just a wonderful, captures her intensity, really, you know, because isn't that really what artists do, is they see and they help us then see. And this photograph is so compelling toward Los Angeles, California. Here these gentlemen, migrant workers, are on this dirt road. It's actually probably Highway US 99 in California. And, you know, she captures this moment against this billboard. "Next time, try the train, relax," right? As if that's an option. And just to call your attention, you know, her famous migrant mother down on the right, from the same period. And really one of the most important seminal artists of the 20th century, Elizabeth Catlett, we see here, had a long career spanning many decades, and really was a great artist and activist. And in her quote, we see that sentiment reflected. "I've always wanted my art to service my people, to reflect us, to relate to us, to stimulate us, to make us aware of our potential. We have to create an art for liberation and for life." We see this idea, this sentiment running through really all of these women, in terms of using their voices, using their art to elevate people, to draw attention to matters, and in Elizabeth Catlett's case, particularly to draw attention to and to celebrate African American women, most especially, and African American people in general. Additionally, later in her life, she moved to Mexico, spent a lot of time in Mexico, and started to look at indigenous people in Mexico as well, and to spotlight their lives and struggles, particularly. Catlett she earned her graduate degree studying under Grant Wood, the painter Grant Wood in Iowa. And you know, Grant Wood really impressed upon her a couple of things: to certainly depict what she knows, what she cares about, and also a kind of a stylistic approach that is quite somewhat linear and pared down, as we see here reflected in waving. Catlett, when she went to Mexico, studied printmaking at a famous school in Mexico City, and really became an expert printmaker. And also she was an incredible sculptor. It's often how we remember Catlett, in addition to her printmaking, her activist images, and sculpture. But this is just a gorgeous example of a lithograph that she created, where we really can see her true expertise with the medium. We can see this kind of really tight kind of cross-hatching. It gives us a nice texture and sort of spatial feeling. And then this delicate sort of outlining the lighter areas of this stylized figure and the arm and the hand, and the draping of the clothing. We have such a beautiful range of tonality for which she was really known as a printmaker. And then we can see we come right in on the face, very beautifully spotlighted, almost sort of a spiritual expression on this gentle figure. So an incredible person who really used her art to elevate, you know, the plight of African Americans and all of those around her. Another activist artist, Karina Kent, was born in Iowa and not to a wealthy family. And so when she was 18 years old, Karina decided to head to California. She joined the Immaculate Order, Roman Catholic Order, and she got a degree in art, and she taught art to students and children, and she became really interested in the medium of printmaking, specifically silkscreen, which apparently she was self-taught in silkscreen, ordered a kit and taught herself how to create silkscreens, because, you know, she thought that method was most accessible, very democratic way of making art, and a way that she could reach the most people and help others make art that would reach people as well. Karina Kent was really active in the 60s and 70s. She was anti-war activist and just a human rights activist. And I just love this quote from her that when art has changed, it's because the world was changing. And, you know, it really ties nicely in thinking about how art reflects its time, how artists reflect time and their time. And it counts for so much of the variety that we see, particularly today in the art world. So much is always changing, and artists are responding in varied ways. This is Stars from 1967, and I also want to call your attention to at moments when some of these works came into the New Britain collection. In this case, this was a gift from John Fitzgerald in 1968. I don't know more than that about it, but what a wonderful gift back in the 60s, how timely, because Karina Kent was active, particularly politically at that time. So this work is actually on view right now. If you visit the museum, you'll see it. It's in the Some Days Now exhibition, along with a number of sort of poster-like pop art images that it is known for. And I thought what we would do is take a closer look so that you can actually see the text, and I will read it to you. Her messages were always messages of sort of love, inspiration, and very in healing, and very focused on humanity. So this one reads as so: "That's what's needed, don't you see that? Nothing else matters half so much. To reassure one another, to answer each other. Perhaps only you can listen to me and not laugh. Everyone has inside himself, what shall I call it, a piece of good news. Everyone is a very great, very important character. Yes, that's what we have to tell them up there. Everyone must be persuaded, even if he's in rags, that he's immensely, immensely important. Everyone must respect him and make him respect himself. They must listen to him attentively. Don't stand on top of him. Don't stand in his light, but look at him with deference. Give him great, great hopes. He needs them, especially if he's young. Spoil him. Yes, make him grow proud." So we see a very sort of uplifting, lift all spirits, lift all people message coming from Kent, which is, you know, typical characteristic of her messages. Her earlier work was somewhat more religious and spiritual. She did eventually leave the order and moved to Boston, where she spent the rest of her days working as an artist and an activist. And so these sometimes images that seem sort of pop or simple have very deep messages that are heartfelt and hopefully inspire us to affect positive change ourselves. So here we have Faith Ringgold, who at this point is, some 90 years old, has had just an incredible career, certainly an activist, an artist, a feminist, groundbreaking, a person who has worked across media. We see her standing in front of one of her quilts, for which she became really well known. And she's such a fascinating artist of great impact, has led protests at the Whitney Museum in the 70s to call attention to the lack of representation of women artists, but also particularly of women of color in their biennial and other exhibitions. She was born and raised in Harlem and really grew up in the vibrancy of the Harlem Renaissance and around musicians and writers and storytellers. Her great-grandmother was a slave, and she was enslaved, and she created quilts herself for her households. And so this was part of the inspiration for Faith using quilting, but also other mixed media methods in becoming a great storyteller. And particularly, as she quotes, "I've always wanted to tell my story, or more to the point, my side of the story." And she really tells us, really gives us revised stories of African Americans and the plight of African Americans in history through her quilt and other political works and activist works, some of which, again, are on view in the Some Days Now exhibition. This piece right here, Can Sing, that is in the permanent collection within view in the Some Days Now, but it's a wonderful piece that was shown back in 2019 or so, and in a great series of installation. And it depicts, it's from a series called Mama Can Sing and Papa Can Blow. And it's all about jazz. She grew up in this music household, and we see it's depicted here in this beautiful sort of figure ground situation that if we look at it, the ground is this black, incredibly rich black, and the face is also part of that. So she moves easily between the background and constructing the figure with the just simple, deceptively simple, almost naive mark. It's just very simply drawn, but the power is incredible. Just a palette of this very light blue, this pale blue against a sort of a pale orange, complementary colors. Just restrained palette, but huge impact, really capturing the joy and the vibrancy, the music coming out of gorgeous singers framed in lipstick. In this lower area, we see Mama Can Sing, the title of the piece. And so this is from a series that did in that time period. And there are many other exuberant from this. So I really go look them because they're fabulous. I think that's all I want to say. All right, I'm getting a message at my internet connection. Okay, Lisa Lapi, let me know if there's any problem.
You froze just
so now
a tiny bit, but we really were able to hear you, but you froze just a tiny bit. You're fine now.
Okay, I got a little, my internet connection is unstable. That's never a good, never a message.
You're very stable now.
Okay, there. So we're again moving into another artist, Lapi, who was museum in, I think it was in 3 when this work was acquired by the museum. This was titled Converging Territories. And society, Moroccan artist, he had been studying in Boston at the museum, and around that time is when she was discovered by Douglas Highland, our director at the time, and we had a wonderful New Now exhibition of this and many other works by us of this series. I think it's, I want to, again, look at the quote because it's so revealing, and it connects the through lines that we see happening with really all of these artists in saying, in my art, I wish to present myself through multiple lenses: as artist, as Moroccan, as traditionalist, as liberal, as Muslim. In short, I invite viewers to resist stereotypes. And this idea of stereotypes and history and the roles that often women have been assigned to are topics being really carefully looked at by many artists that we've already seen and those that we'll see shortly. But let's take a look more closely at this incredible image, Converging Territories, number 12. Asai's work in this vein, and really I think across the board still today, is these are photographs. This is a photograph, and it's staged photograph. So these are staged works, and they're depicting women, Moroccan women, who are using henna, which a traditional material would be used to decorate hands and feet of women during weddings and celebrations, and they're using to write in calligraphy. Though the indecipherable words, basically what Asai is doing is she's taking the tool in that society of writing in calligraphy and using a female or a feminine kind of material, the henna, that is often decorative, but in this case, she's using it to create a sort of language, almost something spoken between women only, but only their understanding. So it's sort of flipping the power structure, flipping the conversation, and changing the way we see women, we think about women's power. She's also using veil and folds and other materials that would be associated with Morocco and Muslim culture. So it's really just a powerful, incredible image, and she's a remarkable contemporary artist. I'll just give you another minute. You look at, we see the bowl up here, the hand, and it's just, in addition to being somewhat mysterious, it's just gorgeous and captivating. A work that is hard to walk by without, really spending time with it. Another New Now artist that from, I think, 2010 is Nagara Kami. And Nagara Kami was born in Baltimore, raised in New Jersey. I think she still lives in New Jersey. Her work is just explosive. And I'm gonna grab a quote here that I really love that she says, or a couple words. She describes her work as intentionally maximalist, which, that as soon as I read that, I thought, yep, that sounds right. This is Backsplash from 2010. Again, we purchased it out of that New Now exhibition, and we're going to take a closer look at the actual work because it's quite complicated and intricate. But at first glance, we see a lot of references to ceramics, Majolica, Persian images and patterns. She even references an interest in and references to Matisse. So she's really pulling from many different cultures and traditions in art to create a work that resonates across different time periods, different cultures, and offers us really a dizzying cacophony of just sound and image. And it's both flat and has, it's built up, you know, there's a gesso layer. So there's some, not just texture, but actual depth to the painting. There's glitter, it sparkles. It's really, really dynamic. She puts this work in a category that is, she considers somewhat cartoonish, which, you know, is very playful. There is a cartoon sort of playfulness to it. So let's take a little bit of a closer look. We can come in and we can see swirls and of patterns that are very Persian and Islamic. You know, there's a whole blend going on in terms of where she's pulling from. We see beautiful stars, and of course, here we see New York City, and this sort of pot pouring out, right? And here's some water, and we see figures swirling in it, and we're going to zero in on the next slide a little bit more. And when you come in close, you can really get a sense of the expressions, the concern of the characters who are being sort of mixed and tossed into this kind of stew. Is it, you know, a melting pot? Is it, what is going on here, you know? And we see Lady Liberty down here with her eyes looking up at them. It's not a, you know, her expression is she's sort of holding this torch, almost like she's trying to show them the way, but her eyes have a really a cartoonish look to them. I don't know if she's, you know, guiding them or more worried for them. So it's a wonderful piece in the collection. And you may remember, some of you, that we had another work of hers as part of the George O'Keeffe Beyond exhibition about a year and a half ago. Kara Walker's, again, another true activist, feminist, you know, all of the above, whose work is really just powerful, stopped you right in your tracks. And this quote, you know, these two quotes I pulled, I think really say so very much about the silhouette says a lot with very little information. And that's also what the stereotype does. It's also, you know, relates to racist views as well. And the second quote I think is really important here. I didn't want a completely passive viewer. Art means too much to me. Be able to articulate something visually is really an important thing. I wanted to make work where the viewer wouldn't walk away. He would giggle nervously, get pulled into history, into fiction, into something totally demeaning and possibly very beautiful. And we were fortunate to open the 2020 year and 2020 series of exhibitions with an exhibition of Kara Walker's work, specifically of works from the Harper's Pictorial History of the Civil War annotated. And at the same time, we acquired this suite, this portfolio of 15 of her prints of the Pictorial History of the Civil War. we see her really brilliant use of a very old art form brought into new context by overlaying images of African American people on historic kind of documents, really calling out the missing history, that was told or presented during the Civil War, the history that missed the stories of African American people, and continue to be, missing to this day. So her work is very, takes time. It's very powerful, and we're really thrilled that we have this portfolio now in our collection so that we can have selections on view. We also have a permanent online exhibition featuring the portfolio and other related conversations around the exhibition and the work of Carol Walker. So I really, invite you to think about your response as the viewer. Again, the artist is quite aware of who the viewers are, and definitely understanding that she's making work that is at times maybe difficult, makes us nervous. And I love the idea of getting pulled into history and into fiction to help us see more and think more about the world around us. We're going to look at the Guerrilla Girls again. More good news. This is our most recent acquisition, it turns out, that we have acquired the portfolio of Guerrilla Girls, really posters, for lack of a better, I guess posters is really the long and the short of it. Here they are. So who are the Guerrilla Girls? The Guerrilla Girls were formed in 1985 to really call out the inequities and inequality in the art world as it relates to the showing of women's work, the collecting of women's work, etc. Since 1985, there have been about 55 different Guerrilla Girls who take names of famous women artists from history. Currently, we are in conversation, myself and two of my colleagues, Lisa Williams, Lisa Lapi. We've been in conversation with two of the Guerrilla Girls, Augusta Savage is one of them, in planning an upcoming presentation by the Guerrilla Girls, as well as a workshop that they're going to lead on October 19th and 20th. I mean, November 19th and 20th. So be on the lookout for that because it's going to be really exciting. They, have since then they've had hundreds and hundreds of performances and these kinds of posters. This one, do women have to be naked to get into the Met Museum? This is the kind of the first one, maybe the most iconic of their images, but they are numerous and they use a combination of humor and shaming and irony. They call out facts like the one we see in the middle below in the dollar bill, that women in America earn only 2/3 of what men do. Women artists only 1/3 of what men artists do. And then sometimes humorous comments about the advantages of being a woman artist. The top one, it's working without the pressure of success, not having to be in shows with men, and it goes on and on. Having an escape from the art world in your 4 freelance jobs. And so in this work, their work is political, it's activist, it's also, falls into this area of institutional critique as a kind of way of making art. And we never see their faces, even in the conversations that we've been having with them in planning the events. They keep their screen off because they don't want the messages to be about them individually as artists, but about the Guerrilla Girls in a larger sense. So they keep their identities hidden, which is really fascinating on another another level. So there, again, if you visit the museum right now, you will see a large number of the images from the portfolio on view in Some Day Is Now. And they really each require a little time to dig into and think about. And I hope you'll be able to take a look and visit the museum. I'm going to, I think, have one more slide. Yeah. So I thought we would kind of sort of conclude and use some words by Elizabeth Catlett that bring us, I don't know, sort of to the point of this year of exhibitions focusing on women and women, art, and social change, and the way many contemporary women artists are working today, and to sort of think about, while it's perhaps true that art alone can't change the world, art can raise consciousness of injustice, expose abuses of power, and illuminate possibilities for social transformation. So I want to leave you with that thought. And I also hope that this conversation has maybe prompted you to look more deeply into our own collection of women artists, which you can peruse on our e-museum. Think about looking at other women, artists in other collections, and just diving a little deeper into the subject. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I do see a question from Heidi. So Lala is mainly a photographer, but she does work a little bit in other media, but predominantly, yes. Yes, and backsplash, she is referencing the 9/11 and all these events in New York. Absolutely, yes. Any other questions? Yeah, I would encourage you to, was it difficult? Yeah, oh my gosh, that was the hardest part. Was it was like I felt like it was in a candy store, and then I had to decide, I can only buy so many pieces of candy. It was really hard because of course you want to talk about all of them, and that's not possible. So I thought maybe we could do this more often if there's interest. To my understanding, Jackie, I think that it could be true. I don't know if they're all deceased. That's a really good question. I don't know the list of all the names. I think that's a really good one to look up.
Laura, can you read the question before you answer it? Yeah, thank you.
The question is, so let's see. One of the questions, let's see, where did I go? Was backsplash. I'm thinking everybody can see the question. Sorry about that. So one question is, Lala Saidi strictly a photographer? For the most part, yes. I think she does work in a little bit related media, but that's her medium that she's most known for. Backsplash reference to 9/11. Yeah, there's a reference to all of the strife that has happened in New York, especially around 9/11. Was it difficult to choose from the many artists, women artists? Yes, very difficult. Again, once I started sorting through it, the strategy for this was to look at an illustrator, because we do have one of the most well-known and important collections of American illustration in the country. And so I thought it would be great to, start there with a female illustrator who is such a feminist. And then from there, draw some through lines that would, again, echo the objectives of our 2020 initiative and certainly line up with our Some Day Is Now exhibition. The question of, do Guerrilla Girls adopt names of only deceased artists? I think maybe, but I'm not sure. Any plans to add more works by women artists to the permanent collection? Yes, it is a major focus and for the museum to continue to collect women artists, and that is a high priority. and we will hopefully have some new acquisitions coming soon. So great question. Let's see, who would you like to acquire next? I know that Jane Quick to See Smith has been on our list, top of our list. So that is someone we're very keen on bringing into the collection as one example. Yeah, I was surprised, the comment, surprised 15 years ago that less than 5% of any art in museums was done by women. We are making progress. Yeah, so, you know, and thanks to a lot of the women artists, right, out there who have been activists, not only to really elevate others from, you know, oppressed communities, but also to call attention to the matters of equity in gallery representation, which leads to museum acquisitions, and women being absent from textbooks and the canon, the Main Street canon. So many of these women that we've looked at today have had a major impact in influencing and updating the canon. Yeah, that's a great, yeah, in Converging Territories, it appears that a society has turned her back on tradition. She talks about that, but she doesn't, it's that, but it's also kind of creating, right, a whole other tradition, if you will. So some of it is at once turning away, but also it's taking hold and grabbing the mantle, if you will, and saying, no, here's the tradition that we're going to now consider. And society does that, as do many of these other artists as well. What has the response been to the 2020 programming? Will there be more women artist exhibits moving forward? And so the response has been very good. Obviously, COVID has maybe, you know, put a little bit of a damper on things, of course, but there's certainly, I think, great interest from what we've seen in work by women artists. There's just an incredibly rich and exciting amount of work coming, being created by women artists. And we certainly are committed to continuing to show more women artists in the future, absolutely. So if you have any particular suggestions about women you think should be part of the New Britain collection, or perhaps part of future exhibitions, do share, do email us. We always love to hear from our incredible members, and thank you so much for your time and your interest and your support. Have a great day, everybody.